All right. Next up, we have conflict in two ways. Daphne Howard introduces new ways to see conflict and how it can be better for the world if used the right way. She says, conflict doesn't have to be the problem, but a way to discover new people and strategies for life if used the right way.
Conflict. That one word can mean many things. It could be a disagreement, like an argument with your sibling. It could also be a fight, like a war or battle. Conflict affects many people, some more than others. I want you to think about a country that has a significant amount of conflict. Now you probably thought Russia or Iran, but there's another country I want to bring to your mind, Eswatini. While it's a small, landlocked country inside South Africa, conflict can still exist with crime and civil unrest. I now want you to imagine you're walking through a small local town and everyone is peaceful until you hear screaming coming from in front of you. There is a local store getting robbed by a bunch of masked armed criminals and the police are nowhere in sight. This is common in Eswatini and also is an example of conflict. But there are two different ways to use conflict. It can be used excessively to get what you want, but could also be used to find a new perspective. Conflict doesn't have to be the problem, but a way to discover new people and strategies for life if used the right way. Now, let's take a little trip to Eswatini, but see what's happening from 1868 to 1968. Eswatini has a long history dating back to the Stone Ages, but most of the bad conflict began and lasted during these 100 years. From 1868 to 1903, there was a lot of different interactions the Swazi people had with the European groups. However, the first group seen by the Swazis was the Dutch, also known as the Boers. The Boers started settling in Swaziland in the early 1840s, and by 1845, 300 families were settled. As more families kept settling into Eswatini, there was a lot more sale documents so the Dutch could get all of Swaziland. But the South African Republic at the time didn't want this, and they kept fighting against the Dutch, which of course caused conflict. All this conflict soon led to the Anglo-Boer War. The Boer War ended in 1903 when British won control over Eswatini and made it one of its protectorates. To be a protectorate is to be under the control of another country for anything in turn for surrendering to control. Now, the first few years that Eswatini was under the control of Britain, there was a lot of inequalities in terms of land. According to kidskittle.co, 1/3 of Swaziland was for the actual natives, while the other 2/3 was for the whites and royalty land. Now, because of these inequalities, the Swazis were complaining about why they weren't having as much freedom as they used to. Well, since Britain had control over Eswatini, there was a lot of different conflict that the Swazis were committing because they didn't want to be under the control of Britain or having any more inequalities than needed. And as more complaints kept coming to the Britons, there were a lot of rule changes. And as the rules kept changing, it kept making Eswatini just more free, which then caused Britain to think we should probably let them go soon. Which Eswatini got their wish after World War II when they were freed from Britain, at the same time as the apartheid. The apartheid was a racial discrimination movement in South Africa that affected many black natives in the area. And Britain wanted to prepare Eswatini for independence so that it didn't affect them as much. However, times changed after independence. King Siphoza II died with his son, Prince Makhosetive, soon to be Mswati III at age 18, underage, to be a king. Usually, kings in Eswatini would have to be 21 years old, but since King Siphoza II died, there were a lot of power struggles and he was soon forced to go up to the crown. Now, you could probably guess that being a teenager and ruling a country with already so much conflict in it could be really hard. I want you to imagine you're ruling the United States, but you're only in high school. It'd be pretty hard, if you ask me. But ever since his father's death, he had a lot of different ideas on how he could help change the country. He first decided to get rid of a very powerful legislative group called the League. If the leak of code had become too powerful, there could have been more conflict in the future, and also could have caused just another civil war. Now, there's a time that I experienced a time of conflict used in the wrong way. I was at a movie night for my brother's Little League when someone next to us started accusing me of taking one of their baseball gloves. I already brought a glove to the park with me that night, and I hadn't even gone anywhere near their area, let alone trying to steal anything. And we kept showing that we didn't have anything but our stuff, and he soon left out of frustration, maybe to go find the glove, or to maybe just out of frustration. However, he soon came back a few moments later and started accusing me again. My mom and grandma soon cracked because they were just too angry at what was going on and why the situation was just escalating from being used the wrong way. If the guy hadn't just realized that maybe I wasn't the person that took his glove, or maybe the reason why his glove was missing, he would have just left me alone and could have went to someone else to maybe ask, hey, have you seen my glove? It's like maybe describing it or something. Because of this conflict used in the wrong way, we had to leave a little bit early so that we didn't have to be affected by the conflict as much in the future. That was a year ago. Now, when I was trying to plan this talk, I realized that me and Swati III have experienced some of the sort of the same conflict, just on different levels, because of course he's a king and I'm a normal civilian. But with all the different conflict that both of us have experienced and it being used the wrong way, there's been a lot of similarities that both me and him have experienced. Now, going back to Eswatini, there have been a lot of struggles in the country that have brought Mswati III and the lives of the population challenges. According to worldbank.org, 44.5% of the population is living in poverty or earning less than $3 a day. Now, 44% may not seem like much, especially to all of us in the United States, which we have a bigger population. But if you take 44% out of the population in Eswatini, which is 1,242,822 people, that would still be 546,841 individuals living in poverty. And that number is pretty ginormous. It can definitely affect a lot of our lives, especially if the poverty keeps growing. And some people may look to people that have more wealth in their lives. And with Mswati III having a net worth of around $200 million, people look to him to help his country. But he keeps his money to himself. That has brought him many, many conflict and violence along the way. Now, you may be wondering, why the heck are you talking about a person who is selfish and only cares about himself? Well, he has used the conflict that has been presented to him the right way, because he knows that his country can't take any more conflict than what it has experienced in the past. And of course, there's just been a lot of different things that he has struggled with in his life, and he doesn't want anyone else to suffer from as much anymore. So that's why he's not using his money to maybe help his country a little bit more. Now, conflict can be hard to get by, and sometimes even harder to make sure it doesn't escalate. But if you just take a moment to relax and acknowledge both sides of the argument or the situation, there could be a very close step to resolving the whole entire conflict. Now, I implore you, the next time you or someone else is experiencing conflict, try to use it the right way instead of making the situation worse. It could be hard, but there is always a way. You just have to find it. Thank you.